June 6, 1944, Omaha Beach, Normandy. The ramp dropped, and Sergeant Mike Russo's boots hit salt water before they touched sand. Around him, men crumpled into the surf. Machine gun fire stitched the water white. He threw himself behind the steel hull of his M3 half-track as bullets hammered the armor like angry fists. The vehicle shuddered but held. Inside, Private Henderson was already on the .50 caliber, returning fire in controlled bursts. The engine roared, tracks biting into wet sand, and the M3 lurched forward through hell itself. Before we continue, hit like and subscribe if you enjoy these World War II deep dives. Comment where you're watching. From your support keeps these stories alive. Russo grabbed the side rail as the half-track clawed its way up the beach. Explosions threw sand and smoke into the air. Men used the vehicle as mobile cover, running alongside its armor until they could peel off toward the seawall. The M3 wasn't supposed to be elegant. It wasn't supposed to be perfect. But in that moment, with artillery screaming overhead and the Atlantic wind carrying the smell of cordite and blood, Russo understood something the planners back in Detroit had known all along. This ugly, hybrid half-truck monstrosity was the only reason they were still alive, and in the months to come, he would watch it transform not just his squad's survival, but the entire tempo of the European war. 3 years earlier, the problem seemed almost academic. American military planners sat in War Department offices in Washington, staring at maps of Europe and North Africa, trying to solve a puzzle that no amount of strategy could fix with doctrine alone. Infantry moved too slowly. Trucks bogged down in mud. Tanks raced ahead, leaving foot soldiers exhausted miles behind. The Wehrmacht had demonstrated in Poland and France what mechanized warfare looked like when properly executed lightning-fast, combined arms operations that shattered static defenses before they could respond. The United States Army needed a solution, and they needed it in quantities that matched American industrial ambition. Not dozens, not hundreds. Tens of thousands. The answer couldn't be a tank too expensive, too slow to produce, too maintenance-intensive for the scale required. It couldn't be a truck wheels were efficient on roads, but helpless in the terrain where modern war was actually fought. What emerged was a compromise so strange that even its creators weren't entirely sure it would work. A vehicle with a truck's front end and a tank's rear tracks. Half one thing, half another. Entirely American in its pragmatic refusal to let perfection delay production. Engineers at the White Motor Company, Autocar, and Diamond T received specifications that read less like a wish list and more like an ultimatum. Build something that can cross mud, carry a squad, mount heavy weapons, stop small arms fire, and be manufactured using parts already rolling off commercial assembly lines. Oh, and make 40,000 of them. The M3 half-track was born from that impossible requirement. It used a White 160A X-engine, a straight 6, producing 147 horsepower. Not impressive by armor standards, but reliable, simple, and crucially already in production. The front axle came from commercial trucks. The steering column, transmission, and electrical systems were borrowed from existing designs. But the rear was pure military necessity, a Kletric track system that gave the vehicle traction no wheeled design could match. The armor was 6 to 13 millimeters of rolled homogeneous steel, thin by tank standards, but sufficient to stop rifle rounds and shrapnel. The plates were mounted vertically, not for aerodynamics, but because it was faster to weld, easier to repair, and simpler to manufacture. The hull was open-topped, a feature that sparked heated debate. Some officers called it a death trap. Others understood that mobility and situational awareness mattered more than overhead protection in the kind of warfare America was about to fight. Private First Class James Chun, a test driver at the Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland, later recalled his first impression of the prototype. "It looked like someone welded a truck to a bulldozer and forgot to finish it," he said. "Then I drove it through mud that swallowed a deuce and a half up to its axles. The M3 just kept going, didn't complain, didn't quit. Just chewed through it like the mud had personally insulted its mother. That was the M3's genius. It wasn't elegant, but it was relentlessly functional. Testing pushed the vehicle to its limits and then passed them. Engineers dragged it across frozen ground, loose sand, shell-pocked fields, and inclines that seemed designed specifically to embarrass overconfident machines. They overloaded it with troops, ammunition, mortar, and fuel until the suspension groaned. The engine kept pulling. The tracks kept biting. The transfer case kept distributing power without twisting out of alignment. Hill climbs became one of the M3's defining characteristics. It simply refused to acknowledge grades that stopped other vehicles. Commanders watching the tests began to reconsider what counted as passable terrain. If the half-track could make it, infantry could follow. If infantry could follow, breakthroughs wouldn't stall waiting for resupply. The tactical implications were enormous. But there were problems. Radiators struggled in dense mud, forcing redesigns of airflow louvers. Carburetors needed retuning for cold weather. The braking system faded faster than desired on steep descents, prompting improvements in drum design. The ride quality was, by all accounts, punishing. One test crew sergeant wrote in his report, "This vehicle rides like a brick being dragged over railroad ties. But it gets there." And in war, getting there is the entire point. By early 1941, the M3 was ready for production. And by December of that year, after Pearl Harbor, American industry shifted into a gear the world had never seen. The assembly lines at White Motor Company in Cleveland, Autocar in Pennsylvania, and Diamond T in Chicago became monuments to wartime urgency. Steel plate arrived in rail cars by the ton. Presses boomed across factory floors, stamping out armor panels in rhythmic thunder. Welders moved down the lines in choreographed precision, joining whole sections with sparks that lit the dim interiors like lightning. The goal wasn't refinement. It wasn't craftsmanship in the traditional sense. It was volume, without sacrificing the core durability the battlefield demanded. Much of the M3's construction relied on parts American factories already understood. Front axles, steering linkages, transmissions, electrical wiring, all came from commercial truck production. This meant suppliers could deliver components in bulk without retooling entire plants. During peak production months in 1943, components converged daily by the thousands. Workers assembled half-tracks at a pace that left foreign observers stunned. At the rear of each vehicle, the track system required more precision. Bogie wheels, idlers, and drive sprockets needed exact alignment to prevent the catastrophic track shedding that would immobilize a vehicle under combat load. Casting and machining tolerances were tight, but achievable with American industrial discipline. Inside the hull, troop benches, ammunition racks, and weapon mount points were installed with functional simplicity. Nothing existed for appearance. Every bracket, clip, and hinge served a purpose. Electrical systems were basic but reliable. Wiring harnesses were laid out to avoid shorts under vibration, a common failure in early prototypes. Ventilation louvers were cut with careful consistency, balancing airflow for the radiator with the need to block incoming fire. Fuel tanks were positioned along the hull sides where armor and structure offered the best chance of containing damage. Quality control teams inspected every completed M3 before it left the factory. Track tension, brake response, engine timing, fuel delivery, all checked with unromantic thoroughness. Problems were documented, analyzed, and solved. If a fix required a redesign, engineers redrew it overnight. If it required a hammer and a curse, well, that was faster. One inspector famously noted that half the M3's reliability came from precision, and the other half from the hammers used to persuade stubborn components into alignment. By the time production peaked, the United States was manufacturing M3 half-tracks at a rate of over 2,000 per month. The total would eventually exceed 41,000 vehicles, more than any other Allied half-track design by an order of magnitude. That scale wasn't just manufacturing triumph. It was strategic depth. It meant units could be equipped, losses could be replaced, and entire armies could maintain mobility without waiting for supply bottlenecks to clear. And when the first M3s began arriving in North Africa in 1942, soldiers discovered that the strange hybrid machine actually worked. The Western Desert was the M3's proving ground. British and American forces facing Rommel's Afrika Korps needed mobility across vast expanses of sand, rock, and broken ground where wheeled vehicles floundered. The M3 delivered. Its tracks bit into loose sand, providing flotation that kept it moving when trucks sank to their axles. Infantry who had previously trudged behind armor now surged forward in formation, arriving at objectives without the exhaustion that had blunted offensive momentum. Lieutenant Daniel Kozłowski, commanding a mechanized infantry platoon in Tunisia, kept a journal that captured the M3's impact. February 14, 1943. We moved 30 miles today. 30 miles. A year ago, that would have been 2 days of marching. Now we do it in 4 hours, and the men are ready to fight when we arrive. The half-track doesn't just carry us, it preserves us. But the vehicle also revealed its vulnerabilities. Armor, adequate against shrapnel and rifle fire, became a liability under concentrated anti-tank weapons. German 88mm guns punched through M3 hulls like paper. Machine gun crews learned that the open top demanded constant vigilance. Overhead artillery bursts sent shrapnel raining down into the crew compartment. Soldiers adapted, piling sandbags along the hull floors, wearing helmets even in sweltering heat, and developing an instinct for when to dismount and when to stay mounted. The ride quality remained brutal. Troops joked that the M3 had 2 gears uncomfortable and unbearable. The suspension, designed for durability rather than comfort, transmitted every bump, rut, and rock directly into the spines of its passengers. After long movements, men climbed out, stiff and aching. But they climbed out alive, and they climbed out together, which was the entire point. Reliability became the M3's defining trait. Engines started in cold North African dawns and scorching midday heat. Tracks held tension through shell-torn ground. The vehicle carried wounded ammunition and commanders long after more delicate machines had broken down. Failures occurred, but they were predictable and repairable with common tools. Maintenance crews praised its accessible layout, the straightforward engine bay, the simple track assemblies, the ability to swap major components without specialized equipment. One mechanic, Corporal Eddie Ramos, described it simply: the M3 brakes, sure, but it brakes in ways you can fix with a wrench and some cursing. That's worth more than a fancy machine that needs a PhD to repair. By the time American forces prepared for the Yafithic invasion of Sicily in July 1943, the M3 had become indispensable, and its adaptability was only beginning to show. Field modifications transformed the M3 into a family of vehicles. Units mounted 81mm mortar in the hull, creating mobile fire support platforms. They installed radios and map tables, turning half-tracks into command posts that could move with the front line. They welded additional armor, added extra machine guns, and rigged canvas covers for desert sun and European rain. The 75 mm gun motor carriage, a variant mounting an anti-tank gun on the M3 chassis, gave armored formations a powerful punch in engagements where towed artillery couldn't keep pace. Perhaps most critically, the M3 became a lifeline for wounded soldiers. Its open hull allowed medics to work on casualties during movement, and its mobility meant evacuation from the front happened in minutes rather than hours. Men who would have died waiting for ambulances survived because a half-track could reach them, load them, and deliver them to aid stations while their hearts were still beating. The vehicle's impact on Allied tactics was profound. Before the M3, breakthroughs stalled because infantry couldn't exploit gains fast enough. Tanks would punch through defensive lines, but foot soldiers arrived too late, too tired, and too disorganized to consolidate the advantage. The M3 changed that calculus. Now infantry moved at armor speed. Commanders could plan operations assuming troops would arrive fresh and ready to fight. The tempo of war accelerated, forcing Axis commanders to respond to momentum they couldn't match. In Normandy, M3 South stormed the beaches despite the carnage. Sergeant Rousseau's vehicle was one of hundreds that clawed their way off Omaha Beach on June 6, 1944. Many were hit. Many burned. But enough survived to deliver troops inland, keeping the invasion moving even as German defenders fought with desperate ferocity. In the hedgerows of Normandy, half-tracks became mobile fortresses, pushing through narrow lanes where ambushes waited around every bend. The open top that had seemed like a flaw became an advantage. Crews could scan for threats, fire in any direction, and dismount instantly when the tactical situation demanded it. Private Henderson, the gunner who'd manned the .50 caliber on D-Day, later reflected on the vehicle's role. "We didn't love it," he admitted, "but we trusted it." And in war, trust matters more than love. By August 1944, as Allied forces broke out of Normandy and began the race across France, M3 half-tracks were everywhere on roads, in fields, cutting through forests, fording rivers. Their distinctive silhouette became synonymous with American mechanized infantry. German soldiers learned to respect the vehicle not for its armor, but for what it represented: an enemy with the industrial capacity and logistical sophistication to motorize entire armies. The strategic consequences rippled far beyond individual battles. American production of the M3 created a template for mobility that influenced Allied operations across every theater. When the Soviet Union received thousands of M3 South through Lend-Lease, Red Army commanders integrated them into mechanized rifle battalions, using the vehicles to maintain pressure during the massive offensives of 1944 and 1945. French forces rebuilt around American equipment, with M3 South forming the backbone of units like the 2nd Armored Division under General Leclerc, the division that would liberate Paris in August 1944. The economic impact was equally significant. The M3's reliance on commercial components smoothed wartime production, avoiding bottlenecks that plagued more specialized designs. Factories maintained steady output even as resources tightened, giving logistics officers the confidence to plan large-scale operations, knowing replacements would arrive on schedule. This industrial stability became a strategic asset, allowing the United States to sustain offensives that would have collapsed under supply constraints. The vehicle also taught a broader lesson about military engineering. Modularity, parts commonality, and ease of maintenance weren't luxuries, they were force multipliers. A vehicle that could be repaired by a crew with basic tools was worth more in sustained combat than a superior machine that required factory-level support. This philosophy influenced American military design for decades, shaping everything from the M113 armored personnel carrier to the Humvee. But perhaps the M3's most unexpected legacy was human. Soldiers who served in half-tracks described a strange sense of camaraderie that came from the open hull. Unlike enclosed vehicles where crew members were isolated in separate compartments, everyone in an M3 shared the same space, the same air, the same vulnerability. They saw each other's faces. They communicated without intercoms. They moved as a unit, not just tactically, but psychologically. Corporal Sarah Mitchell, a driver with a transport company in the European theater, captured it in a letter home. "There's something about being exposed together," she wrote. "We're all in it. No one's hiding. No one's protected more than anyone else. It makes you look out for each other in ways I don't think we would if we were sealed inside." That sense of shared fate, of mutual dependence, became part of the vehicle's identity. And when the war ended in May 1945, the M3 didn't disappear. Surplus half-tracks flooded the post-war world. Nations across Europe, the Middle East, South America, and Asia adopted the M3, not out of nostalgia, but because it still solved problems their own industries couldn't yet address. Israel used M3 South extensively during the 1948 War of Independence and continued fielding them for decades. Brazil, France, and Yugoslavia integrated them into mechanized units. Even guerrilla forces and irregular armies found the vehicle invaluable, its simplicity meant it could be maintained with minimal infrastructure, and its hybrid design allowed mobility across terrain where modern logistics didn't exist. Engineers studying the M3's performance drew lessons that shaped the next generation of armored personnel carriers. Visibility mattered. Crews in open vehicles could scan the battlefield more effectively than those sealed inside. Modularity saved lives and budgets. Parts commonality allowed nations to maintain fleets long after American production stopped. And repairability was strategic. Vehicles that could be fixed in the field remained combat effective far longer than fragile designs that required factory support. These insights fed directly into post-war designs like the M75, the M59, and eventually the M113, the most widely produced armored personnel carrier in history. The M113's designers explicitly cited the M3's lessons: keep it simple, keep it repairable, and keep it moving. Culturally, the M3 became one of the most photographed vehicles of World War II. War correspondents loved its open top for clean camera angles, and soldiers embraced it as a shared tool of survival. Veterans recalled the smell of hot engine oil, the clatter of tracks on pavement, and the constant vibration of its hull sensations forever tied to their service. A mechanic in occupied Germany joked in 1946 that the M3 would outlive him. "These things don't quit," he said. "They just get reassigned." He wasn't wrong. Stand in front of one today and it still feels ready to move. Its angular armor, open hull, and hybrid running gear project restless practicality. The M3 never asked to be admired, only to be used. And throughout 5 years of global conflict, it was used harder than almost any Allied vehicle. Its design wasn't revolutionary. It was American, a blend of what worked, what was available, and what could be mass-produced. Wheels and tracks, truck and armor, visibility and protection, each choice embraced imperfection in exchange for durability and adaptability.